What do you do when everything you build falls apart? Your business, your reputation, maybe even your freedom. Most people never come back from that, but my guest today, he did not just come back, he wrote the blueprint on how to rebuild. And now he is building thousands of other people do the same. This one is going to hit different. Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Influencer Stories Hub, the show where we sit down with the people who actually did it, the grind, the falls, the comeback, and the whole story. I am your host, Sheikh Sahid. Today, we have a conversation that have genuinely been looking forward to for weeks. Let's get into it. All right, my guest today is someone who has lived through real disruption, the kind of the breaks most people, and he came out the other side, not just surviving, but helping others rebuild too. He's based in North Carolina. He's a business systems expert, an execution coach, and he typically in an area that most people don't even want to talk about, helping people restart their lives, their careers after major setbacks, including re entry after incarceration. On top of all that, he is a published author, not once, not twice, but three times. He wrote Build for Rebuilding, The Business Blueprint, and The Overwhelmed Entrepreneur. Three books, three different communities he is trying to serve. Guys, please give a big influencer stories of welcome to Mr. Joe Cullen. Joe, you are very welcome. I've been doing my homework on you.
Well, you said it all. I can go home now. Thanks for that warm little welcome there. So, yeah, I'm just gonna go. We'll be okay. No, I appreciate it. I am thankful that you have me here. That you're allowing me to share my story. That you feel like anybody would want to hear it. I mean, my story is, you know, it's it's full of ups and it's full of downs. I have, I was telling somebody just a few days ago that, you know, if somebody outside looking in were to take my life and go, man, you've had a really good life, and when you look, especially at the highs. So, if you take all the lows out, yeah, it's amazing. And it really is. And that's not me trying to toot my own horn, because if I step back and look, I'm kind of like, I've done some really cool stuff, so, it's fun. But, hopefully my story will resonate with somebody in your audience and, help them, find the courage to take the next step. And, that's it. At the end of the day, I know that's an overused, little colloquialism, end of the day, but it's about having the courage, having the strength to move forward, even if it's an inch at a time. Keep moving forward. Don't stop and move backwards. If you can, at the end of the day, look in the mirror and say, Joe, you did the very best you could with what you had today. That's all you can do. And that's when it all that's the end of the story that we're gonna tell today. So that's kind of it. So what do you want to know? I mean, I'm an
Yeah.
open book. So I used to try to hide who I was, kind of, just and make myself into whatever I thought the market and the uh, the leaders and the people that I thought I wanted to be needed me or wanted to see in me, and I tried to make myself that, and that's not me.
All right. Before we go deep, and we are going today, let me start easier. What did your morning look like today before you jumped on here with me? Are you a morning routine guy? or you more of a roll out of bed 5 minutes before kind of person?
Well, for me, my typical morning, I'm not in a typical morning right now. There's a couple of things happening family wise that has kind of varied my routine a little bit, but I am I wake up without the alarm clock somewhere between 6 and 6:30 most mornings, and then I break the first cardinal rule of whatever mental health you want to look at. I grab my phone and I will basically hit LinkedIn, kind of flip through it, see if there's anybody I need to respond to or anything, and then I'll flip through my emails, not deep, just to see any major, things that I might need to hit right away, and then I kind of will hang out. The cat will figure out that I'm awake and jump up on the bed, and I'll play with the cat for a few minutes, and then I'm up and going. And this morning, I hit the computer about 7 o'clock, a little bit before, uh, and I had some writing that I needed to do, and I write a lot first thing in the morning. Once I get, make sure there's nothing major that has blown up overnight or anything. I come in and I will sit down, fix my coffee, and either write, LinkedIn content or uh, stuff for other posts on, Facebook, Instagram, those things, or I write a monthly editorial for Global Trends magazine out of Switzerland that is basically the currency of change is the through thread, and then I write something different for them each month. I write a couple of features for Clutch Justice Mag online, so I write a little bit every day. Try to, uh, and then like this morning, I had a team meeting for my guys for our company at 9. Had to run Melanie to work. That's why I said my routine's kind of messed up because we've got a broke down car right now that's got to go to the shop. And then I had a department meeting with marketing and communications about the new launch and social media program and planning for that. Uh, and then, I tried to squeeze in some lunch and come see you. So now I'm here, and that was my rough breakdown this morning. It was not nothing over the top, but still a little different. Normally, the other thing that would fall into my morning that kind of is cut short right now is I created my own uh, personal operating system, is what I call it. When I was writing Built for Rebuilding, uh, it has the foundation for the book is kind of cognitive behavioral therapy, and that CBT component is kind of the foundation. But then I got involved with a membership community called Collaborative Entrepreneur Incubator, and uh, the girls that started women, I'm sorry, girls, the women that started that community are very big into human design. And while I never really kind of got that, talking with them, watching their process, learning from them, I did a little bit more digging and kind of was like, oh, I can see where pieces of this make sense. So I kind of incorporated a little bit of that. And then at the same time, I've always been a fan of Stoicism. So, I've incorporated a lot of Stoic philosophy into the Built for Rebuilding book as well. And my little daily operating system, personal operating system, combines the three, and it has a little morning segment, a midday, and an evening piece that I do. And so my morning uh, operating system piece has been condensed dramatically right now just for time. And so that's the only piece. It usually takes me about 20 minutes in the morning. And right now I've got about 5. So it's good. So Probably more than you wanted to know, but there's my story.
That is fantastic. I have another warm up question, but this is a fun one. What is one thing about you that would completely surprise our audience? Something they would never guess from your LinkedIn profile.
I didn't see that one on the prep questions. No. Uh, let's see. Something about me that would surprise the audience they wouldn't get from my LinkedIn profile. Um, well, I love to cook, and I don't do it as much, but I'm not too bad at it. I have a very good friend who is a chef, and I used to help him in his catering business, his private kitchen stuff, a lot back in the day. So I guess that's one.
I love it. Now let's get into the real story because I have been waiting for this. Joe, take me all the way back, and I mean all the way back. Where did you grow up, and what was the version of Joe that existed before any of this? Before the books, before the coaching, before the mission? Who was that kid?
Wow, yeah, that kid was in a lot of ways very idealistic. He, uh, you know, there were issues growing up that kids face issues all the time, and there was some trauma issues, but that caused me to probably overachieve as a kid. But I grew up in a little community called St. Clair in Missouri. It was about an hour outside of St. Louis, and it was one of those places that you kind of just a few thousand people, and good little school. And I grew up being one of the star athletes in town, and led the team to state semifinals in football, and you know all that fun stuff. And my dad had businesses, and business partners, and it gave me my first opportunity to get a job when I was 12, outside of the farm world. I and then That led to my first entrepreneurial experiment. When I was 13, I presented an opportunity for the person I was working with to start painting their equipment, and it turned into my first sales job, where I sold my own self and sold my painting work, and made three times the money as a contractor painting signs as I did working directly for him for an hour with his kids. So for an hourly wage. So all in all, though, I was that typical teenager, just kind of oblivious to the challenges of the world. Uh, I fortunately, being the athlete that I was able to parlay that into a college scholarship, and you know, take off and you know, experience a lot more than just that small little community that I grew up in.
That is so nice. For better and for us. I want to come back to that, but first, was there a moment in your early life, maybe a person, maybe an experience that first made you think, okay, business is my path?
Yeah, that was, like I said, when I was 12, we'll kind of expand that story a little bit. When I was 12, I wanted a three wheeler, an ATV, and my parents wouldn't get me one. All my friends had them, but they were like, no. So one of Dad's business partners owned the ice company in town. So, where you bagged ice and then delivered it to the ice machines outside of stores. And his kids all worked there. So I thought, if his kids can do it, I can do it. So I walked the mile and a half or so from the house to the ice company and asked for a job. And, it was funny. Alfred was like, "Do your parents know you're here?" Nope. I need a job. So I came to ask for one. And I think that's what impressed him the most was that I just did it. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't ask for anybody to help me do it. I just said, I need this. I want this. I'm going to do this. And, so I went and got that job. And then, like I said, that during that summer, I realized that most of the ice machines outside the stores were faded. They had these plexiglass signs that were backlit, and they were all ripped, faded and peeling, and so I put together at the end of the summer put together a little proposal to uh, paint his signs and paint his machines, and so basically when football season was over and I would have a little more time, even though I wrestled and different stuff, I took this proposal and walked up there again, and parents had no clue I was doing it, and presented him a proposal to to paint his machines and improve their appearance and attract attention. And I basically made this little pitch, and then I broke it down into just painting the Lexans at the top, painting the sides, painting the whole machine, and and he went for it. And over the winter, he started giving me the different Lexans. So I was making money outside of the season because I was getting $75 back then. This is 1983. That's a lot of money painting these Lexan, things for ice machines. And, I was getting $375 to do a whole machine, and so I made $100 a week during the summer bagging and delivering at 50 hours. I was making $2 an hour as an hourly employee and making 375 for doing a machine, which I could do in about a week to a week and a half. So that was when I'm like, this business thing probably for me. So, and then kind of, kept on going, and I did that for a few more summers, and then, when I started driving, that wasn't cool. And I went to work at Six Flags over Mid America, an amusement park, and, spent every dollar I made partying with friends. But, that early business itch came from that sign business. And, and I was fortunate. I grew up in an entrepreneurial household. I watched my dad bounce around job to job, different things, trying to, land where he needed to land. After the company that we had moved to that little town for closed, and when he finally found his first business that he started running, and things became consistent, and then businesses grew, and then his network of friends all owned businesses at that point. And, so I was exposed to those opportunities and that mindset early on. Even though, and this is the disclosure, my dad and his friend were all a bunch of, how do we make this safer recording? They weren't nice guys for the most part, but, they did expose me to a lot of opportunity.
That is quite interesting. Now, Joe, you talk a lot about rebuilding after disruption. And when I read your work and your bio, and it's clear that this is not just something you studied. This is something you lived. So let's talk about the journey. Walk me through the major chapter of your professional life. What you were you doing before you become the person who helps other rebuild.
Okay. To start that conversation, I guess we look at you know the professional life after college. I started my first business. I don't count the sign company as my first business. That was a kid doing something didn't know what he was doing, but he was making money. But I got hurt um, in football and stopped playing during my junior year. And that summer, I was kind of floundering. I didn't know where I was going to go, what I was going to do. I had gotten engaged, so I had a fiance, and that was it. And so I started a little fundraising company. I don't know. I don't remember. I wish I could put the reason why a fundraising company was what I started, but uh, I do not remember why. I just know that I sold Hershey's candy bars, peelers, uh, you know tickets, and American Family greeting cards, and Good Home crap. It was I don't know in India if you guys had it, but here in my generation, every kid just about sold this box of stuff that you took around, and it had all these things in it that people could order, and they were all just useless junk basically, but they were the things that grandmas and aunts and everybody bought. And so I sold that, and then I did some event uh, creation for people, which was fun. And uh, like the biggest event that I did was it was called the Pedigree St. Jude Wonderful World of Dogs, and uh, it was basically this weekend event that had all but four registered AKC breeds represented, vendors and shows and trials, and it was at the Ducks Unlimited headquarters in Memphis, Tennessee, and it was amazing. And so that business though was really good. It kind of allowed my uh, soon to be wife to continue going to school. I had left school for a year, little over a year, after getting hurt, to work and focus on that. And so after a couple years, and I was ready to go back to school, she was ready to do her student teaching. I had a competitor that had actually become a pretty good friend. We would have lunch usually once a month just to talk about how each other was doing, what was going on, what we were seeing. And I told him that I was probably going to quit and go back to school. And he offered to buy my company. And I'm like, I didn't have, at that moment, I didn't think about having anything to sell him. I mean, because it's all but he didn't want the products. He wanted this amazing list that I had built. And, and that was my first, ooh, it's about the data. And now, even more today, as you see business develop and change and grow, people don't buy, especially in digital businesses, they don't buy the product per se, unless it's an app or something like that. They buy the database, they buy the subscribers, they buy access to those people, and that's what he wanted. I had built this, basically in a big five, county radius around Memphis, and about a 2.5 hour circle, uh, just of churches, of clubs, of organizations, of schools, and it was contact numbers, phone numbers, the people's. This list was full, and so that's what he bought, and you know what he paid me for it. I was, I want to say that, I was this brilliant businessman, but no, I was like, you want to pay me? Sure, that would be great. You know, you kind of straighten up, and then you look at the check, cash it, and do the little happy dance. But you know, so that kind of got me started. After school, I graduated with a communications degree. I went into television in the advertising side of the world. Built a really good career over the next, 10, 12 years, and became a regional director, very quickly. I was barely 30 years old and was already a regional director. So I was pretty good at that. During that time, as a side hustle, the internet launched in 1993, the consumer internet. You know, internet was around a lot longer, but the World Wide Web really became a thing in 1993. In 1995, I started a company called the United States Golf Federation as kind of a side hustle. Pure community based, monthly recurring revenue, all online. No physical product, no nothing. There were less than 25,000 websites worldwide. And here I am creating a purely digital business, and nobody understood it. Banks didn't get it. The credit processors didn't get it. A lot of the clients didn't necessarily get it. Uh, you know, the golf courses and the golf business people and stuff had a hard time kind of wrapping their head around it. But all of a sudden we built this model and started doing just putting people into it, and $9 a month to get discounts on clubs and balls and lessons and course times, and it was just basically Sam's Club for golf is kind of how I looked at it. But I saw this vehicle in the internet that was you know provided the opportunity for a guy sitting in, and at this time I'd been back to Missouri, moved to Illinois, uh, you know, in the middle of the United States, little town, to reach out and touch the entire nation and have the ability to cost effectively market and grow a business at that scale. And so I did that. Was fortunate. My family was growing. My corporate career was going 100 mile an hour. Star Capital out of Chicago, Illinois, uh, contacted me, and they're kind of like Dave. They're like, we really like what we're doing. It's kind of interesting. We'd like to talk to you about it. And so I'm like, all right. And we sat down, and they were actually working with another company to produce an online travel company. And if I told you the name, you would be like, oh, that's pretty big. But it wasn't Expedia at the time. It was a little bit smaller, and they wanted me to explain how I was building the model and building the database. So they paid me a very, very, very nice sum of money to buy the data and buy the process. They didn't care about golf. They swept it away. I'm like, okay. So, but that was nice 7-figure deal. So, it was nothing to not write home about. But, at the end of the day, I was just like, wow, this is very cool. And so I was able to take that funding and take my corporate career and continued to move up the ladder there. And I started doing some stuff in real estate and kind of unconventional there as well. For some reason, I've never liked doing the conventional thing. And, you know, sold my real estate business as we moved to the Carolinas. And then here I made, well, I made my first, I built my biggest business and also had my biggest crash. And, and basically bankrupted my family, completely. But we built a company, Race City Management Sports and Entertainment, that was, uh, you know, we produced high school and college football, basketball games, coaches shows, highlight shows, digital content, that kind of stuff. And we grew and grew and grew really, really fast. I couldn't keep up with it. I was, you know, funding it basically by, financing everything. And debt is not a bad four-letter word in a lot of cases, unless you don't understand how much of it you have and how poorly leveraged you are. And you, as a financial person, completely understand what I'm talking about there. It's so when the 2008 financial crisis hit, I had everything leveraged. It went from having a paid for house to having a house that was leveraged. It went from having that big chunk of money in the bank to, you know, it made payroll most of the time, and so we held on to 2012, but it was brutal. Uh, you know, January 2009 was probably one of the worst feelings in business I've ever had. We got through December of '08, and I remember thinking, hey, we might be all right. We had plenty of contracts. We had, all but one had been existing. They were all renewals. So, it wasn't like we were starting up. We were a continuation. I thought we're going to be okay. We're going to make it through this. January, it was second or third. I don't remember. It was early. I got an email that was the first cancellation. And over the next 15 days, all but one contract disappeared. And that one contract that was left was the smallest out of all the contracts. And it's kind of ironic, but it also was the very first contract that we had in the business. So our very first contract was also basically the last one standing when it was all said and done. And, you know, having to let go and basically disrupt that many families is a sickening feeling. And it's I've only had one that's really worse. So it's you know it was kind of brutal, but I learned probably out of everything that I did through all of that experience with Race City Management was probably, I learned more there in that company than I did in the previous 15 or 20 years. The college degree, the plus then go back to the dad running a company. That small window in Race City Management, that is where you know the the greatest amount of my business acumen comes from. So, because I learned not only the sales and operations and all those pieces, but I got a hard lesson in leverage and in financing and in cash flow and all the extra pieces that when you scale something into 8, 9 figures, you don't deal with at 6 and 7 figures. So that was something. So all of those things led up to 2012 when I finally decided to shut everything down. We were that summer of 12. We had a chance to pick up a contract to do a game for the Mid Atlantic Sports Network, who we used to do games for all the time, but the money it would have barely been a break even game, and just did not see the market coming back, because the niche we were in, uh, when we started was great, but after the crash, the ESPNs and Fox Sports of the world had pushed down into that market to try to maintain share for themselves, and it. I don't care how much cash I had, I wasn't going to compete against Fox and ESPN and those guys. So, uh, we shut it down, and I had no clue where I was going to go. So I coached some football and just kind of floundered around, and ended up in a situation where made the biggest mistake of my life, something that was so outside my character and who I am as a person, that it was I still, even after a decade of therapy and all the things that happened, um, still can't believe it at times. And that ended up to me being arrested and going through our legal system, which up until that point I had always thought was just and fair, and all these things that you hear about, the see in the television shows and the movies, and most of it I found out was a bunch of crap. And so I ended up with going through a process that was less than equitable, less than justice. We'll say that. Uh, it was it, it was a horrible, long experience that ended up with me in Orange with a felony. And that led. I know that one of the things that, as we were talking, was lowest points, and we'll get there, but that was the beginning of the fall to the lowest point. So you wanted to know what led up to the Joe before rebuilding became kind of the cornerstone of everything I do, and that's the story in a real rough nutshell. I did not talk about my own family. I mentioned the wife in college, fiance, but had four daughters along the way that are all fantastic. All have three of them have advanced degrees. The one that doesn't have an advanced degree actually has three different degrees. So not a big, not there. All successful, all happy. I'm a grandfather now, five times, three boys, two girls. So, Aaron, the most recent addition, little bitty dude, little bitty. He's like 24 inches long. His parents are both 6 foot plus. So calling him little dude is kind of actually cute. Um, but yeah, so there you go. Does that kind of give you the background you were curious about, or do you want some more? So,
That is inspiring story. Now you have written three books. One of them specifically called "Built for Rebuilding." That title says everything. When did you first realize that? Yeah, great.
sorry.
Yeah, that title says everything. When did you first realize that rebuilding was going to be your actual mission? Was there a specific moment?
Actually, there's seven. You hit the big three. So there's four more back there that that are also all
We
that
are
are big
going
ones.
there. Those
There
two,
are
we
big
are
ones
also
as
going
well,
there.
but yeah, but the rebuilding piece, when all of the legal stuff happened, and when I stepped into that entry place. I thought that I would just kind of put my head down, work somewhere, kind of just be out of the limelight, kind of so to speak. And so, I put together a resume. It'd been a long time since I had applied for jobs, but I, I had a good background, good history. 5 companies. I was a regional director in the corporate world. You look, I had been on 3 different for-profit board of directors. 2 of them startups, one a pretty mature company. I'd sat on a couple of nonprofit boards of directors. So I had a really good network. Uh, you know, so when you put all those things together, I'm like, I should be able to find a job. And so I put the resume together. I applied to 14 jobs. I got 11 interviews, 7 offers. All of those offers were rescinded when they found out about the felony. And didn't matter what it was, where it was, any of that. Just record? No, we don't hire people like that. And this wasn't like I was going crazy. Yeah, one was to run a small manufacturing company. So it was a very senior executive type position. But the lowest that I was offered was assistant manager at a cookout restaurant, little fast food restaurant, and all of them were rescinded because of a felony. And I came home and was talking with Melanie about it, and just completely blown away that it. I in in I preface this by saying I'm saying this looking from a general perspective that I possessed every single um, privilege and credibility you could have in trying to find a job. I had education, I had experience, I had, relationships, I had, you know, the fact that I was male, the fact that I'm a white male, the unfortunately in this world, especially in this country, white male puts you up here, everybody else is somewhere below it. And so talking with Melanie, I told her, I said, what do individuals that don't have my privilege, my background, my experience, what do they do? And we were just kind of, for a while, floored by it. Didn't really know what we were doing with it or what that meant. It was a realization that it didn't matter. And, uh, you know, my best friend in the world, Tim, he and I were talking one day and just sitting and, I was telling him that little story basically. And, that I wish I knew what I could do, and that's where, through that conversation, cider came from. And, cider was built to help individuals who are trying to re-enter society after incarceration with that felony label, um, to help them not have to deal with those rejections. Because, house, job, those 2 things right there determine more than anything if you're going back to jail or not. And so we talked about creating, it would be cool to create an education program. And, so that was kind of the, that first little spark of, I'm going to do something somehow to help people. You know, then, I got sick and went through some things, and I told you that my legal was just the beginning of the collapse into that lowest point. When you add mental health, you add uh, you know the sickness, you add those things, because you know while I was going through trying to be diagnosed and figure out what was wrong, I hit a pretty hard depression as well, and I just figured it was all encompassing. But uh, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder with treatment resistant depression and severe treatment resistant depression. It's a mouthful. Um, and that explained a lot when I look back through my life, because before we came onto the recording, we were talking, and I told you, that I was up and down, and I had a pretty cool life, and then but if you could see all the low parts, it's a whole different story. And I can look back and understanding what I did about bipolar disorder and see that, wow, those highs, okay, those make sense, but those lows, that makes sense too. And so, my whole life, I could now go back to being a teenager and seeing where that impacted me. So, I don't know when 2000 mid 2010s, 2015, 2016, somewhere in that ballpark, maybe a little later. No, more like closer to 2020. I tried to um, harm myself permanently a couple different times. And I had hit the point where I just, I didn't want to do it anymore. Didn't want to try. I'd given up. And, um, I went through the pandemic. I remember not really caring, what happened anyway. And, and then we came out the other side of the pandemic. Uh, I, the bipolar diagnosis, the depression. I had gotten the right kind of treatment along the way. Um, I was in remission from the the health stuff, and things started kind of looking better. And 23, I saw an ad for a writing challenge. Write your first book in 5 days. Was the challenge or something like that. It was a 5 day challenge, and I had always wanted to write a how to start a business book, and uh, so I tried a few times, been unsuccessful. So you know what, I'm gonna do this little course. I did the 5 day course. When Thursday came to write the first writing session, it was to write an ebook. The total book was 5 to 7,000 pages, from what it was supposed to be, or 5 to 7,000 words, not pages. Kind of be a long book. And Thursday we were supposed to write two to 3,000 of those words, and then bring them back and go through them with the cohort. And uh, so I got up Thursday morning, fixed my coffee, sat down at the computer. 3 a.m. the next morning, I stopped writing with 15,000 words. And just, I had written all day long. And because, fortunately, I had the book in my head. I've had it there for 30 something years. It was there. So it just needed the framing and, the knowledge of how to pull it out and put it on paper, and, or on the screen, I guess. I did that, and it was horrible. It's for sale, but I don't know if I would recommend you go buy it or not. Other than the fact that the information is good, it reads like a textbook. So it's and I did that, and that was good. And so fast forward through last year, uh, January of 24. Yeah, I released the business blueprint. Uh, that book was at the time, for me was unbelievable. The business blueprint. Um, get my ads in. The I was like, I started kind of. I didn't really promote it or anything, but I would post about it and stuff. It was more me. All the books have been about me just kind of expressing myself, and I started probably in March or April of 24. Maybe, yeah, it's a little later, but I started journaling uh, of sorts, because my therapist was like, look, you like writing books. Why don't you try like pen to paper writing and just write a journal kind of deal? And so I started kind of writing this journal. And from there, I'm like, I can't read my own writing most of the time. So I started typing it. And I still write every morning, but, I type the writing. And things were going along good, and it was kind of me thinking through the processes of that I'd been going through, just trying to restart my life, restart business, all those things. And uh, got into 25, uh, and we went along, relaunched the business blueprint book with a little more fanfare and a lot more design. And I started actually framing up the business blueprint, or the Built for Rebuilding book. And somewhere mid year, it clicked that, wait a minute, I'm wanting to do this with cider. So I started really kind of looking at what cider was, what I wanted it to be, and how I wanted it to be structured. I started looking at how the business stuff that I was doing, what I really wanted to have come out of my business, um, and how it was structured. And I'm like, you know, this book, or it wasn't even a book at that point, it was just a whole amalgamation of different chapters of writing, kind of basically. And uh, I'm like, that kind of sums up everything I'm doing in one whole principal point. And so it was late last year that was that, you want to say it was that aha moment, but it was aha, but it was more like, man, this is I this is what I want to do, And so here I was 55, going, all right, this did helping people, and it's like you the LinkedIn content writer uh, profile optimizer wants to come up with some fancy name for it, and every time I came back to my basic purpose, helping people. It's just, and it's so freaking generic that it's not a niche. You can't market, I help people. So I just was like, what am I going to do? And I wrote this entire manifesto of just what I kind of, who I wanted to be, what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. And that manifesto then turned into what actually became Built for Rebuilding. And, it was, you know, I looked at it as I was putting it together, and I kind of wanted to have more of an ICP around it, if you would. And I was like, okay, well, people that are trying to recover from collapse. Okay, that's still helping people. What could that be? Well, it could be divorce. It could be bankruptcy. It could be uh, a job loss. It could be illness. It could be criminal. It could be, so I kind of went through, all right. So that's kind of one. But then I was like, well, what do I do Joe Cullen Limited wise? What do I do in my business day to day? Well, I work with senior leaders that are, generally somewhere mid 40s to late 50s. And, their career has gotten derailed for one purpose, one reason or another. They've hit a wall where, the phone isn't ringing near like it used to. What they're doing doesn't ring their own bell anymore. They're just kind of going through the motions. They're no longer on the C-suite track. Either they have pulled themselves out of it, or somebody above them has pushed them off that track. But they're kind of in that place. So their collapse is internal. It's kind of that struggle of, I'm middle age, mid late career. What do I do? Where do I go to finish this thing up? So that was kind of the second. And then, I still, even though it's not rebuilding, somebody that's starting a business, they're still, they don't want to have to rebuild 10 years from now. So if they do it right the first time, so even though they're not a rebuilder, I kind of threw them in there as a target. And then of course the justice impacted people who, are reentering society, are kind of the four, you know, kind of people that I wrote the book for, are had in my mind as I was writing the book. So it's um, you know it become kind of the center piece of all that I do, and and it was kind of that aha moment, but also um, the realization that I had like these different brand points and all these things out there. And I'm like, I don't need all of that really. I need Joe Cullen Limited, and that's kind of the boutique advisory service, and as well as the umbrella that holds all the revenue generating pieces. And then you have Cider, which is the nonprofit and all of its pieces. And then I have the joe-cullen.com kind of site as well, which houses all the kind of intellectual property stuff, all the writing, all the speaking, all those things. So because I needed it to kind of be clean and separate from the Joe Cullen Limited and from the advisory. So is the only reason I kept that. But really, those two, Cider and JCL, are the the drivers of who we are today.
That is fantastic. Now we need to discuss about the overwhelmed entrepreneur. Why is overwhelmed not just a time management problem? Joe reframes it as identity problem. Entrepreneurs outgrow their business but have not grown themselves to match it.
Yeah. So the overwhelmed entrepreneur, I actually wrote um, 2024 somewhere in there. Uh, it's it was one of the early pieces that pointed towards where I'm at now and what I'm doing now. Because when you look, a lot of times the biggest challenge and biggest problem that you find with entrepreneurs, with founders, with that early um, pre-scale but high growth area of a business, that overwhelmed entrepreneur feeling comes because there's a, a limitation or a lack in their processes or their systems or both. And um, so when you look at, you know, making sure that you guard yourself from that overwhelmed position, from that burnout, from, just from, not being in a comfortable spot anymore. You've got to have you, you know, your business process needs to be easily explainable to your team. Your business systems need to be documented in place so that you understand what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, who it benefits, why it benefits. So when you have that series of questions fully answered, fully understood, your business can operate even if you're not there for the day, even if you're not there for the week. If you've got a team, it can operate. If you're a solo, you've designed it so that it flows while you're away. You still have a life, you still have understanding, you still have, that passion to grow. And part of, especially founder entrepreneur uh, individuals, they if they're not able to continue to create and to not just iterate but create new pieces, new projects, new areas, that's when they burn out and become overwhelmed. Because if they get pulled into the box and can no longer move outside of the six walls that that are around them, then you know they lose it. And you know process and system are the two words that entrepreneurs need to understand the most. Right next to finances and debt. So,
That's exactly. Joe, I want to go to the hard place now because I think this is where our audience really connects. You work in the re-entry space, helping people rebuild after incarceration, and I have a feeling that's not just professional for you. Can you talk about what the lowest point in your life actually looked like?
well, um, I had almost 2 years that I barely got out of bed. It, um, you want the graphic example? That was it. I had almost no motivation. I had no drive, no determination, no desire. Uh, if it had not been for Melanie, I would have never made it. Uh, the only reasons I got up at all was I started taking her to work, and then I would uh, come back home, go back to bed, but I would have to get up, leave the house again, and go pick her up. And those two pieces are what kept me alive. And the reason is by taking her to work, I knew I had to go pick her up. So that would counter the negative thoughts during the day. If I didn't take her to work, I was so scared that she would come home one day and have to find me. And I would not wish that on anyone. especially the woman I love. And I unfortunately had the had that happen. I actually found one of my good friends who had uh, harmed himself, and so I know what that discovery feeling um, is. And there was no way I wanted Melanie to have to experience that with me. So, um, taking her to work and then knowing that she would have to have a figure out a way to get home if I didn't go pick her up helped me make it through those days. And then, um, the few times that the two times that you I went a little further than I should have and ended up in the hospital, she was right there. So, um, you know, I couldn't do that to her, and that was, you know, you want the lowest point. That is, uh, you know, there's not much lower.
Wow. Thank you for being that open, Joe. I know that's not easy to say out loud. So,
Yeah, it's not easy, but I know we talked a little earlier that I part of my helping people and part of what I do now also comes with a pretty open book, So being able to share the mental health challenges, the bipolar disorder, the depression, the attempts to harm myself, the things that go with that, the almost bankrupting myself, when my business died after the financial crisis, and so you know on LinkedIn and any place like that, everybody shows the polish, they show the shine, they show the success, they show the glamour, they show, and I'm no different. You don't, if you just scan down through it, you see a lot of the highlights. My about section now tells a lot more than it used to, but most people, you go through it and you would see the USGF and the big, 7-figure sale, and the sale of you know the fundraising company and the real estate company, and all those things you see. But I made a decision that I was also going to talk about the harder parts, and where I've gotten pushback is um, the Joe Cullen Limited work, the boutique advisory stuff, um, the working with senior leaders, because a lot of people still hold that misinterpretation of you know mental health, you know collapse, the things you go through. They see it as weakness, as you unintelligent. Just pick a pick a stereotype. So they're scared to be associated. Is what I kept being told. But I still, my I'm getting ready to start doing a little more outreach stuff. But I've never, well, at one time I've done outreach, but other than that, everything that I get is still direct message. It's still, into my inbox. It isn't me necessarily going out to people. So I don't know if the naysayers to the being open are all that correct. So
so true. Joe, you have been on both sides of the wall, literally and figuratively. You have built, lost, rebuilt. What's the single biggest thing you know now that you wish you'd known at 25?
Biggest thing now that I wish I'd have known at 25. That it's funny, but to know that almost everyone has failed at some point. That failure is not final, and that you know I was so scared of every time something bad would happen or something negative, and that people would find out or people would see this or do uh, and you try so hard to be perfect and to appear perfect and to appear you know if I could go back to my 25-year-old self and go, dude, nobody cares about the shoes you're wearing or what the label in the suit is or what the car is. They honestly don't. The ones that do, you don't want to work with them anyway. But for the longest time, I thought that was a big part of it. Had to have the right house, right neighborhood, right zip code, right car, right suits, right shoes, right. It all had to. The kids had to be dressed right. We had to go to the right church and all those things. And none of that is actually real as far as when it comes to being successful. Because, like I said, the people that really truly care about that stuff, you really don't want to work with them anyway, a lot of the times. So, you know, the people that you do want to work with, the people that will help you be successful, help you succeed, they're just like you. They got so many things they're worried about and trying to impress other people. They ain't got time to deal with your stuff, man. Just, you know, do the right thing for the right reasons, no matter who's around, and you're going to be fine. So go back, tell myself that. That would be it's not real profound. It's actually very cliche, but it's very true.
Inspiring. You mentioned systems in our conversation, business systems, executions, blueprints. Why do you think most people struggle with systems even when they know they need them?
And I would probably make a lot more money if I could truly answer that question. Um, it's people struggle, I feel, with systems because, especially in the business world, because you're scared of being constrained. And you want freedom, you want flexibility, you want the ability to iterate and change and pivot and do all those things. So you think, if I have to follow a system, a process, I can't do those things. I'm now within these guardrails, and so people will kind of push back against systems for that reason because that constraint that they think is there, and uh, you know, and as a coach, as an advisor, as a teacher, part of the challenge is showing them that a system or a process or whatever your working framework, that guardrail, that framework, that system actually will give you far more freedom to be yourself, to take chances, to take risks, to iterate, to pivot, because there's that protected area there that says, yeah, do what you need. Here's kind of where we're going. This is the system. These are the things we need to do. How do you make it better? If you can make the system better, you know, you make it better. So, that's why I think, though, ultimately is it's the fear of being constrained.
That's so nice. Let's make this real for our audience. Whether someone is coming out of incarceration, recovering from a business failure, going through a divorce, losing a job, what are the first three steps you tell them to make right now to start rebuilding?
All right. That's, you know, big question and great question because, most people try to, you know, push past as fast as they can. Uh, that ends up being a short term win and a long term loss most of the time. So the first three things that I would suggest that um, the first is you get brutally honest with yourself. Hard, brutal truth about where you're at, what happened, why it happened, what you can learn from it. Answer those questions. That brutal truth. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't do the Reader's Digest version. Get freaking serious and really dig into it. Go deep and understand it. Once you know and understand where you are, what happened, why it happened, and how it happened, now you can start looking at how to fix it. So two, the second kind of key thing is then take inventory of that why in your life. Try to find your big why, not a small why, you know. But you asked me, about the whole rebuilding, how I found that. But but the why is what drives me, and that is helping people. Is the little why, and there's some bigger ones we might get into, but we are getting pretty deep into your show. But really understand what you want the future to look like. I guess is where I'm trying to go. You know, don't just and I know this is the hard one because we all have bills, we have mortgages, we have rents, we have kids, we have college, we have things we have to pay for. We have lives, and in our society, very few of us have savings to live off of. So, so that what do you want the future to look like question is actually really scary because if you answer anything other than a job tomorrow, your nervous system says no, and so you've got to push through that nervous system and calm it a little bit, and then the third thing is it you want to hear take action. No, it's not time to still take action yet. We're still looking for agency, self-worth, value. you know Basically we want to reclaim our identity. That's number three, is identity reclamation. Just you've did the hard, real hard truths. You've kind of went through and decided this is what I would love the future to look like. What would that what's that entail? And then is the person standing here capable of that? And that person, if the answer is no, then you need to kind of question where you're at, what how you feel in those things. And when you look at the built for rebuilding model, basically what I described is pillar one in essence, and uh, you know dignity, agency, self worth. Those without those you cannot build or rebuild either way. long term a successful structure because you don't have a solid foundation. And you know, you can rebuild, you can make money, you can get a new job, you can do all those things, but the problem is down the road the same cracks are going to develop that developed before. And uh, I use the analogy that built for rebuilding is five pillars. That identity, reclamation, dignity, agency, self worth is pillar number one, and it's right in the middle. It's not top, bottom, any side. It's in the middle because it carries the weight of the entire program. And then you've got the four corner pillars that weight's distributed out to equally, and you've got tools and structure, and you've got all the way up to income and stability. And so it's a process that you walk through, but those are your three steps to get started.
Fantastic. That's a master class in these three steps here. Now,
We're still recording.
yeah, for someone who's an overwhelmed entrepreneur right now, drawing in their business, what's the emergency move they should make this week?
An overwhelmed entrepreneur that's growing their business, what's the
Emergency
big
move.
step to make this week?
Yes, yes.
Hmm. Ah, let's see. I would say being able to answer in 20 words or less what your company does and how it works. If you can do that, then moving forward, you can continue to fine tune, processes and systems. If you can't, your team doesn't know why you're doing what you're doing. So you got to figure that out before you can do anything else to minimize uh, you know the overwhelm, the stress, because you start a business, it doesn't matter. You're going to be stressed. It's just part of the deal. It's you'll have fun being stressed, but you're going to be stressed. But if you cannot explain your business in 20 words or less, or even bigger, somebody on your team truly explain your business in 20 words or less, then you need to kind of go back to the drawing board and figure out, what it is you do. And I know that sounds harsh and cruel and, like, who the heck are you to tell me? Oh, that's what I do. I tell you, so, but at the end of the day, it's not meant to be mean or harsh. It is a way to say you don't have clarity of your operation. And until clarity is there, you can't have the systems, you can't have the process because you don't know where you're going. You're doing too many things, too many different directions, and they may all be aligned, but you don't have the clarity to do that. And I was guilty of it in what I was doing. We were talking about it just a little while ago. I had all these different brands and different names and different things that I was trying to do, and it really all boiled down to helping people either in the nonprofit or the for profit. And, the rest of it falls below that. So, a year ago, I couldn't tell you my business in 20 words or less. So there was that.
Simple, free, and probably going to save someone's business who's watching this right now. Thank you for that, Joe.
You're welcome.
Now we're entering rapid fire round. I'll ask you the question. You have to give me answer, very short answer, in one word or maximum two word.
Ouch. All right. I talk a
Are
lot.
you okay? Yeah. Let's move on. One word to describe your 20-year-old self.
20-year-old self. Lost.
Biggest myth about rebuilding after failure.
Biggest need about rebuilding what?
Biggest myth about rebuilding after failure.
Uh, dignity.
Book that changed your life other than your own.
Uh, wow. It's been a couple. Probably Who Moved My Cheese was probably the silliest, easiest, smallest book that had the greatest impact on me.
Something you would tell your kids or the next generation that you wish someone told you.
Probably the biggest is, and it's funny because all four of my girls still have degrees, but you don't have to have a degree to be successful.
Nice. Uh, Entrepreneur or employee, which life is harder?
Oh, choose your hard. I'm gonna say that for me, an employee life is harder. But that's just based on mindset. So I guarantee you there are several hundred million or a couple hundred million people that'll tell you that entrepreneurial life is the harder. But
The last one. What's the best compliment someone has ever given you about your work?
actually, probably I get it a lot more often these days. But this morning, I could open up my LinkedIn, just thanking me for being real and being there and being supportive. So that to me is, at the end of the day, what I want to be. I want to be there for someone. I want to be that support system, that support that they can count on to help them out. And it's funny. I got that message this morning, and my post this morning on LinkedIn about rebuilding in real time was about the fear that you face, and part of that is wanting to be the support and the encouragement and the person for Melanie, and yet I got a person that DM'd me because I just sent them a message to check on them, see how they were, and thanking me for being that support and being that encouragement. I'm like, oh, well, thank you very much. So that's the if anything else, that's the biggest one. Yeah, by far.
I love, I love that. Joe, before we wrap up, I don't want to wrap up. Honestly, this has been incredible. Uh, where can people find you online? What platforms are you most active on? How do they get your books, work with you, all of it?
All right. Well, the easiest way to find me is LinkedIn. That's where I'm the most active. It's Joseph Cullen 14 is actually my LinkedIn profile. Uh, Joe dash Cullen CULLEN .com. Right now is probably the best place to get a broad sense of of who I am, what I do. You can get my books all there through the bookstore. Uh, Books are also available on Amazon, and then here in another couple weeks they'll be on my Shopify store too. But right now, joe-cullen.com would be the place to go to, or my LinkedIn profile.
There was a question also was there. How do they get your books? Those three
Because
books.
they can go to joe-cullen.com, and on the website there's actually a page that they can order the books. So the books are available there. They're also available on Amazon. So
Fantastic.
joe-cullen/books .com/books if you want to go straight there. So
We are going to share those links in our description, LinkedIn link of Joe, and also those books link. So you can connect with Joe through LinkedIn. Also, if you want to get those books, you can try those links, which is in our description below.
absolutely.
And Joe, what would you tell, Joe? What would you like to say directly to our influencer stories hub audience? You know this channel is called Influencer Stories Hub. What would you like to say directly to our influencer stories hub audience? Why should they subscribe? Why should they share this episode?
Well, here's the thing. One of the things that I say, especially with the Built for Rebuilding book, but even with Joe Cullen Limited, my for-profit company with cider, everything I do when it comes to helping people is the reason to subscribe and to buy the books and to connect is people can rebuild stronger than the life that broke, but they don't have to do it alone. And, Built for Rebuilding is the book I wish I would have had when I was trying to rebuild. That's what this book is the book that I wish I had had to help me rebuild. And, now that I, you know, have been through it, I want to help as many people as I can, whether that's rebuild their personal lives or their business lives. And uh, that's that's the end of the day, everything I do is fun because I'm helping people do that. And so it's you, now I get to smile a whole lot more than I used to.
Joe, I said this was going to be special and you delivered times 10. Thank you for your honesty, your courage,
Thank you.
and your generosity in sharing a story that I know is not easy to tell. You came in here and you gave everything, and I have so much respect for you that
Thank you. I appreciate that.
to everyone watching, this is why we do this show. This is exactly why. Joe's story is a reminder that disruption is not the end of the story. It can be beginning of the most important chapter you will ever write. Go his book and follow him on LinkedIn and share and subscribe. Share this video with your friends and family and share, subscribe this channel and see you in the next episode. Thank you, Joe, for your time once again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.